Okay, part 2. All right. Who is John Boehner? John Boehner is, I'm going to keep holding this up because for some of you, I know you need it, and it helps because you get confused. John Boehner is in the legislative branch. He's in the House of Representatives. He's the Speaker of the House. John Boehner, Speaker of the House. All right. Vice President is Joe Biden. What is he president of? We might have gone over this in the last one, but he's president of the Senate. If Congress passes something, so if it goes through both houses of Congress and they pass that they're going to outlaw red shirts from now on, I'll have to pick something else for my wardrobe. If they rule that and it goes to the executive branch and he vetoes it, the president vetoes it, not the cabinet, but the president vetoes it, and it goes back to Congress, how can they pass that law if they want to override the veto? How they can pass the law is by a 2/3 majority. So 2/3 of the Senate have to rule. And usually for that you need a little bit of bipartisanship, because usually you have a majority of the Senate, the minority of the Senate, and usually the majority doesn't make up 2/3 of the Senate, okay? So usually you have to have some Republicans and some Democrats, which is a great way to pass things anyway. In the Declaration of Independence, we've talked about the Declaration of Independence, I know, several times. I think it's so important. And remember, we went against England. Taxes was our number 17th reason. There was so many other things. Like we wanted to outlaw slavery and they wouldn't let us in the northern states. We wanted to reach out to the Indians. We wanted to print materials. We wanted to have Bible studies. All these things, Sunday school and all these things, and he would veto it. We would set up like little ruling bodies like you would have locally here. We would have, we have ruling bodies and we have a mayor and all that so that, we can decide on things. The city council will decide and make laws and decide on things. And he would not let that happen and just come in and abolish all of our laws. And so you can't really have law and order. And then you also have people just, searching and seizuring up a storm. They're just going in because there's no laws that say they can't. So if they work for the king, they would go in and just confiscate things. You can understand how that would so churn up the colonists. They're trying to do the right thing. But all these things were happening. Also, England was getting ready to establish a church here. It's very well documented. They were going to start sending over priests and set up a church here too. And of course, we came here for religious freedom, and they were just getting harsher and harsher and trying to control us. Also, remember, we could only sell certain things to England, and it was just all around. They were making us poor. They were taking the riches, and at the same time, they weren't letting us make laws or rule in a proper way, in a godly way. All right. Let's see. Who is currently in control of the Senate? The majority party of the Senate. So here we are, the Senate. Majority part of the Senate is Democrat, and Harry Reid is in charge. So Harry Reid's the majority leader. He's a Democrat. He's in charge of the Senate. Who rules the House of Representatives? The Republicans right now. John Boehner's a Republican. He's supposed to be a conservative, although he's removed a lot of conservatives from the committee chairmanships. So it's really distressing a lot of us because we're like, oh, he's removing a lot of the Tea Party people, which is a little bit scary. So, okay. So Harry Reid's in charge of the Senate. John Boehner's in charge of the House of Representatives. Minority leader, remember, in the House of Representatives is Nancy Pelosi. All right. Let's see. How many terms does the president serve? He serves a 4-year term, and then if he's reelected, he serves another 4-year term. All right. The House of Representatives are elected every 4 years. The Senate, they're elected every 6 years. The Constitution did not intend for people, especially in the House. This is supposed to be the common people. It didn't intend for them to be in there for years and years. It just didn't. And it was just, so sometimes you'll hear the word term limits, and that's where people want to come in and say, okay, you can only run 2 terms, or, just like the president only now runs 2 terms. So that's why you'll hear term limits. How many justices are on the Supreme Court? 9. Okay, 9 justices, and the Chief Justice, John Roberts. Let's see, the 3 names of the conservative justices are, we've already talked about this, Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia, and John Roberts. What term do we use? We went over this from your reading from, I think, 2 weeks ago. But what term do we describe when Congress, or the Senate, I'm sorry, to confirm somebody in the judicial branch on the Supreme Court, they just hold up their confirmation. They won't confirm them, and they do it on purely political basis. And a lot of times what they're doing is they don't want the new judicial system. Like if there's a new judge and he goes from a liberal judge to a conservative judge, and he doesn't want them to overturn, or they don't want him to overturn Roe v. Wade. So they're afraid that they'll overturn the abortion case. And so that's called borking. When they held up Robert Bork, they wouldn't confirm him. Ronald Reagan nominated him. They didn't want him on the Supreme Court. They were afraid he would overturn Roe v. Wade. It was purely political. That's not how intended. If you win the White House, you're supposed to be able to put up appointments to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, right now, very strong liberals are in charge, and they might put up very strong judges. Someone dies or something happens. So we should be praying for that always. Let's see, Dred Scott. Who was that? We talked about that in class. Dred Scott is a black man who took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court told him that you are property. You cannot be an American citizen, even though in our Constitution it says all men are created equal. So they told him you are property. And which president totally ignored that, and through the Emancipation Proclamation, and then after the war, freeing all the slaves, because the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free all the slaves. I didn't know if y'all knew that. It freed some of the slaves, but not all the slaves, unfortunately. So anyway, Dred Scott was his name. He was a black man. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court. I cannot imagine having the Supreme Court of your country tell you, you are property, you're not a person. So boy, it was a horrible, horrific decision. Abraham Lincoln totally ignored that, and it really to this day has not been challenged. That Dred Scott ruling has not been struck down, which it could be. It just never has, and it's ignored, which is terrible, terrible, terrible. All right, judicial review. What is that? That's when the judicial branch rules whether the legislative laws are constitutional. They just did this recently on Obamacare. Unfortunately, they did rule that Obamacare was constitutional, but it wasn't constitutional. And John Roberts was the swing vote, unfortunately, for the bad side, because it was real political and he was pressured. He wrote the opinion that said, no, this is not constitutional, but then he sided with the other side. So the dissenting opinion was actually what he wrote. To me, that was a terrible day in U.S. history when he did that. I think he'll regret it for the rest of his life. He is the reason right now we're going to have Obamacare, and it's just going to take this country down. I believe that. Without prayer, and God can change anything. Majority party means we have the most in the party. If you're the majority, you have the most. Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader in the House of Representatives. She's very well known because she's a woman, for Speaker of the House woman. She was the Speaker of the House when the Democrats were in charge of the House. All right, Supreme Court. There's 9 people on the Supreme Court, 9 justices. They have to be confirmed by the Senate. Let's see, minority. What the minority party is, just the party with the least in it. I think we've pretty much gone over all this. Let's see. President pro tem is usually the oldest member of the Senate. So it's not the oldest, like, you don't say, okay, he's 100, we're electing him president pro tem. It's the guy who's been in the Senate the longest. It's kind of an honorary title. I don't like if it's an honorary title that he's 4th in line to the presidency, if it's just the oldest member, but such is life. That's what it is. Veto, that's what the president does. If Congress sends a bill that the president doesn't like, he has veto. If he just doesn't rule on it for 10 days, doesn't look at it, doesn't do anything, it's called a pocket veto, and it just doesn't go through. All right. Let's see, I put search warrant. That's if somebody's going to come in your house, and to come in your house, they'll say, hey, can I come in your house? You do have the right as an American citizen to say, do you have a search warrant? And if they have a search warrant, they don't really ask anyway. They just say, step aside, we're coming into your house. And they can search. And a lot of times on the search warrant, it says, we're looking for this and this and this. And those are the things they're supposed to be looking for. If we're looking for a diary, or we're looking for a gun, or whatever it is. So it's a good thing we have a search warrant. It's because of the Bill of Rights that police can't just police, who are mostly good. Policemen are good, but everybody needs checks. They can't just storm in your home because they don't like you or you drove too fast or whatever. They have to go to a judge and they have to say, Judge, one of the lower court judges, of course, they have to say, Judge, we think we need to see it for this reason. All right, part 3 is coming up.